test kolokvijum odložili. Tako smo to i rekli. Znači, sada, Nataša i ja razgovaramo o novom terminu. Mi danas svakako imamo predavanje, a vi ćete ovih dana dobiti informaciju o tome kad će kolokvijum biti održan. Znači, gledat ćemo da bude, to će svakako biti ovaj termin kad imamo čas. Znači, ovaj termin od 14 do 15:30, znači neki ponedeljak, ali informaciju ćete dobiti svakako za nekoliko dana kad pogledamo Nataša i ja još sve druge termine. Znači, bit će u tim učionicama u kojima smo i bili dok nije počela nastava online. Dobro, da čujem da li možda neko ima neko pitanje ili komentar pre nego što krenemo. Evo, studenti se još prijavljuju.
Mene zanima, izvinite.
Da, može, da.
Zanima me da li će možda biti, znači, 15. mislim da je ponedeljak.
Sledeći ponedeljak neće biti skoro sigurno, znači bit će kasnije, znači neće biti ponedeljak, jer mislimo da je to rano, znači nismo se još Nataša i ja dogovorili, znači mislim da skoro sigurno neće biti sledeći ponedeljak, to je čini mi se 14. ili 15. Da.
U redu, hvala vam.
Dobro. Evo, još se studenti prijavljuju, ali ja ću pustiti ovaj slajd koji nameravam da pustim jer smo tu stali. Tako, sad bi trebalo da svi vidite ovaj slajd Syntactic Functions, pa ja predlažem da mi polako krenemo. Samo da vidim još jednom, da, još neko ili ne, nema nikog, dobro. Let me remind you, we're discussing syntax. Any questions or?
Da, ja ne vidim, ne znam za ostalo.
Da li vidite ovo?
Kod mene se isto ne vidi.
I kod mene se ne vidi.
Ne.
Isto ne vidim.
Dobro, ajde da ja to probam ponovo. Ovako. Probat ćemo ovako. Znači, da probam ovako. Sad bi trebalo da se vidi. Ja imam signal da you are presenting to everyone, pretpostavljam da sad vidim, ali tako?
Da, sada.
Da, vidimo.
Sad je bolje. Dobro, sad ću ja to odmah uključiti, ja se izvinjavam, da, dobro, pošto je otišao. Syntactic structures, to bi bilo sad to, jel tako? Pretpostavljam da se sad vidimo. Samo da vidim, ovdje još neko hoće da uđe, samo sekundu. Syntactic structures, sad tu bi trebalo da sad vidite i tu smo stali, jel tako? Pretpostavljam da sad vidite, ja bar imam oznaku da treba da se vidi. So let me ask you first, let me remind you, we are discussing syntax, so let me remind you what we did. We did the types of clauses, they are important, you remember nominal, modifying, finite, non-finite. This is important. You get the types of clauses for the written exam, not for this test, but for the written exam. Okay, let me just check. Yes, somebody else. So types of clauses are important for you to recognize. Think about examples for the oral exam. You always need examples for these clauses. Sometimes students cannot provide examples for the oral exam. Think about this tree diagrams and IC analysis. This is also possible for the written part of the exam, not for this test. All right, this is what we did last week. Now we have to continue with syntactic functions. What we did is that we talked about the units. Units like word combined into phrases, then clauses and sentences. We discussed these units in syntax. We defined them, said something about the structure of a phrase. You remember head word, pre-modification, post-modification, and types of clauses. Now, we have to think about the functions. Function is simply the role which a unit has in a clause. Okay, so think about two levels. First, structures like words, phrases, and clauses. And then these units, these structures can have a certain role in a clause. This role is called syntactic functions. Okay, I'm absolutely sure you already know them, but I have a list here. Okay, like subject, predicate, direct, indirect object, adverbials, subject, object, complement, and so on. Okay, so we're going to say something briefly about each of these. So think about it. We have the function of a subject, but we have different structures which can function as the subject. Okay, so let's start with the subject. You'll see that it is very simple. We are going to give very simple definitions. Okay, subject is usually a noun or a pronoun, noun phrase or a clause. We'll have examples later. Usually precedes the verb in a declarative clause, not in questions, and it is included in the agreement with the predicate in person, number, if the language shows person and number. In English, we have ed or s. Subject presents the topic of a clause, which means simply this is the topic about this clause is revealing something new. So the topic, the subject is the topic about whom you add something new in a clause. We don't have to add much more about the subject, so think about it, noun, pronoun, noun phrase, or clause, but we have to say much more about the predicate. Okay, predicate indicates something new about the topic. The topic, you remember, this is the subject. Verb is the central element in the predication. So we have to think about the verb, okay? So simply saying something new about the topic. This is the function of the predicate. When we think about the verbs, we divide verbs into three types. Linking verbs, sometimes called copulas, okay? Vezivni glagoli, okay? Transitive verbs, verb transitive, VT, and intransitive verbs, verb. This VI means verb intransitive. Let me just check if somebody else, yes, we have to admit one more student, okay? VI means verb intransitive, okay? So you know that verb intransitive does not have any complement, does not need anything in addition to the subject. So we don't need an object. We have the subject and the verb, simply. It is intransitive. Verb transitive, it implies that it has a complement. Direct object, sometimes even indirect object. So transitive verb has a complement, has the direct object, sometimes indirect object. In English, when we talk about the direct object, it could be a noun phrase or a clause following the verb in declarative clauses. And you already know this, we'll just check the examples. Indirect object, if it is there, placed before the direct object, or could be a prepositional phrase after the direct object. You already know this, but let's check the examples for A and B anyway. Okay, all right, let me admit somebody else. Yes, okay, sorry. Okay, so Pamela gave Mary the book. Mary, indirect object, which means placed before the direct object. That book is the direct object. In this case, Mary precedes the direct object. But if it is a prepositional phrase like to, then it is after the direct object. Pamela gave that book to Mary. You know this, but sometimes students get confused. You cannot explain it. This is very simple, okay? The position of the indirect object, before or after the direct object, okay? So in addition to the direct object, we can have the object complement. I'm sure you're already familiar with this from grammar courses. So this is placed immediately after the direct object, like they elected him president. Him is the direct object. President is the object complement, which means it refers to the direct object. Immediately follows the direct object. Or in Serbian, ona je učinila svoju ćerku srećnom, ćerka direct object, srećnom object complement. Or finally, again, English, they painted the bathroom blue. The bathroom, the direct object, blue, the object complement. Okay, so we have the direct object and object complement. Object complement immediately following the direct object. Okay, so these are, remember, these are transitive and intransitive verbs. We have to explain linking verbs or copulas. Okay, so copulas, they're not transitive, they're not even intransitive, they're specific. Why? Because they require the subject complement. SC abbreviation, okay, subject complement. That's why they're called linking verbs or copulas. Okay, so we don't say that they are transitive, intransitive, simply they are linking. Okay, so now somehow a natural question arrives to compare the direct object and subject complement to see what is the difference. Okay, the direct object and subject complement. So we have, for example, the first difference, A, subject and subject complement have the same reference. Subject and object, direct object, do not have the same reference, which means they do not refer to the same person or item or thing. Okay, so for example, 6A and B, these flowers are nice. Nice is the subject complement. B, the verb be are in this case, this is the linking verb followed by the subject complement. And nice refers to the flowers, to these flowers, to the subject. This is what I mean. Subject and subject complement have the same reference. However, in B, Paul bought these flowers. Paul is the subject, bought is the transitive verb. These flowers, this is the direct object. And you can see easily that subject and subject complement, they do not have the same reference. They do not refer to the same person or entity. Okay, this is the first difference, same reference. Okay, the second difference between the subject complement and direct object. Okay, in most cases, direct object can be passivized, subject complement cannot. Just notice that I have here in most cases. We have some exceptions, direct objects which cannot be passivized. But generally speaking, direct object can be passivized, subject complements cannot. 7A and B. Linda became a teacher. Linda bought a new dress. Okay, Linda became a teacher. A teacher might look like a direct object, but it's not, because the verb become is the linking verb. And Linda and the teacher have the same reference. They refer to the same person. Okay. And what about the possibility to passivize this? A teacher. You cannot really say a teacher is become or has become by Linda and so on. So that's how you can prove that this is not the direct object. Okay. And in B, Linda bought a new dress. In this case, bought, not became, bought, transitive verb, a new dress. First of all, Linda, new dress, completely two entities, not the same reference. And you can passivize a new dress was bought by Linda. Okay, so think about the second difference is passivization. Okay, so C, subject and subject complement agree in gender and number, which means that if a language shows agreement in gender and number, then they do agree. In English, we have just a few cases where you can see the agreement. Okay, so for example, Ken became an actor is fine. You see, you cannot passivize an actor. An actor was become by Ken, not possible, but you can also not add plural actors. Ken became actors because the subject is singular. The subject complement has to be singular as well. This is what it means, agree in gender and number. Okay, or B, this is agreement in gender. She is his brother. Not possible. You already know that this asterisk, this small star, means not grammatical. I think we already had this. Okay, she, feminine. His brother obviously masculine, cannot actually agree in gender with she, and that's why this is not really acceptable. So C, characteristic C, subject and subject complement agree in gender and number, but if language shows this this agreement. Okay, in English, in some cases, yes. Okay, however, we do have some exceptions. For example, their main product is potatoes. Number 9. We have the subject, their main product is singular. Then we have the linking verb be, but we have potatoes, plural. Okay, this is grammatical because potatoes implies general notion of the product they produce. Okay, so bear in mind, C, there is agreement. You cannot have actors, it can, but there are some exceptions like in 9. Okay, let's see some copulas in English, some most frequent copulas in English, like be, become, and seem. Be is the most frequent copula. Become, we already had a couple of examples. Seem as well. Okay, so however, some verbs in English can be used both as copulas or as transitive and intransitive verbs. So just bear in mind, the same verb can be sometimes used both as a copula and as a transitive or intransitive verb. Okay, let's check the examples with 10A to E. Okay, Tom became a lawyer. Become is a copula. This is a subject complement. They have the same reference, Tom and the lawyer, and you cannot passivize a lawyer. Okay, however, let's check the verb turn. Okay, this could be a question for you perhaps. Okay, the milk turned sour, and C, he turned the tap. Okay, what would you say about the verb turn in B and in C? The question for you would be linking verb or transitive verb B or C. What would be your comment about the verb turn?
10B is have subject complement.
Yes. Yes.
It is a copula, and he turned the tap. It is transitive.
Yes, exactly. This is what I wanted to point out. So we have the same verb turn. In this case, this is sour. Sour is the subject complement. Turned sour. The milk, the same reference. He and the tap, obviously not the same reference, and you can passivize. The tap was turned by somebody. Yes. Okay. The same thing goes with the verb grow. He grew old. D or E, he grew vegetables. So the same question and the same answer. D, the adjective old is the subject complement. It's an adjective, you cannot clearly passivize this, but they grew vegetables, noun, direct object, and can be passivized. Vegetables were grown by somebody. Okay, so to sum up, we are discussing predicate. Okay, let me go just slightly. Okay, we are discussing predicate, direct object, indirect object, and subject complement. We already mentioned the object complement. Okay, so to sum up, the differences between the direct object and subject complement are these. We mentioned them, these 3, okay, A, B, and C. We do have some exceptions like 9, but usually it works. The most typical copulas be, become, seem, but we also may have verbs like turn or grow as copulas as well as transitive verbs. Okay, I think this should be clear. Okay, you may be asked to show the difference between the direct object and subject complement, and you need to apply these tests like A, B, and C. Okay, so we finished predicate. Now we have adverbials. You know that adverbial, we are discussing syntactic function. So let me underline, adverb is a part of speech, like quickly. But adverbial, or adverbials in plural, it's a syntactic function. This means the function which modifies the predicate, okay? So think about it, the difference between adverb and adverbial, okay? So adverbials, they modify the verb, they modify adjectives or other adverbs. We have adverbials of, you know that from secondary school, from place, time, manner, condition, cause, and many others, okay? So let's check the examples in 11, A, B, and C, okay? So for example, she visited them last year. these two letters in bold are, this is an adverbial. Now, this is an opportunity to think about the levels I mentioned, the structure and the function, okay? Maybe I could ask you, structurally speaking, last year is what? What kind of a structure, what kind of a unit is last year, structurally speaking?
A phrase.
It's a phrase. What kind of a phrase? Yes. What is year? Year is a
No.
noun.
No.
It's a noun phrase. Yes, exactly. Okay, so think about it as a unit in a structure. It's a noun phrase. Last year, exactly. Okay, but this noun phrase has the function of the adverbial of time. Last year, she visited them last year. So again, structurally, this is a noun phrase. But as a syntactic function, this is an adverbial. This is important. If it is not clear, you can always ask a question, okay? So B, 11B, they failed because they didn't study enough. An example which could be pedagogically useful, okay? They failed because they didn't study enough, okay? Structurally speaking, because they didn't study enough is what as a structure?
A clause.
Clause, exactly. So think about it. It is a clause, but functions as an adverbial because obviously showing cause. This is an adverbial of cause, yes, okay? So this is subordinate adverbial clause denoting cause, yes, okay? Or C, if they arrive soon, we'll go for a walk. What about if they arrive soon? This is also a clause. I think it's clear now. It's a clause. And adverbial functions as an adverbial denotes condition. You know that this is a conditional clause, okay? So think about it, adverbials. Structurally, they could be noun phrases, they could be clauses, but the function is modifying the verb or adjectives or other adverbs, okay? So we have clauses as well here, okay? We're going to develop this in greater detail within this topic, exponents of syntactic functions, okay? So we have syntactic functions, you know, like subject, predicate, object, direct, indirect object, subject, complement, and so on, adverbials, okay? And these syntactic functions have their exponents. I think it's easy to understand if you simply think about it as structures which have a certain function, okay? So let's go back to this example. The last year is a noun phrase, but it is an exponent of the function of an adverbial. This is what I mean by exponents, okay? So simply, an exponent is a linguistic unit representing a certain function or a certain category, okay? You can have it in morphology as well. We are discussing syntax, but let me give you an example for morphology. S as it's an exponent of the category of number, like in book, books, okay? So we have exponents in morphology. Let me ask you, S can be the exponent of the category of number, but also the exponent of which grammatical category in English? Not number with nouns, but which other category for S?
Present simple third person.
Exactly. Present simple third person, like read, reads. Yes, exactly. So think about it. We also have exponents in morphology, okay? So we're going to discuss exponents in syntax now. So exponents can be words, can be phrases, and even clauses. We already had examples, but we're going to add some more examples to these, okay? So think about it. Exponents could be simply words, could be phrases or clauses. So let's start with the subject, okay? Subject. The exponents of the subject could be words, noun phrases, or clauses, like in 12, A, B, and C, okay? Lenny will arrive tomorrow. Lenny is a word. It's a noun. It's a word. But we do not have modifiers. That's why perhaps it's not a noun phrase, okay? This is the subject. But that new computer is very fast, is a noun phrase. That new computer, that's very simple. You have a head word computer and pre-modification. We already did this last week, okay? And we have C, which is a clause. That she is still alive is sheer luck. The subject is that she is still alive. You remember probably the test of substitution. You can say it is sheer luck. You prove that this is one unit. This is the subject. Okay, clause as an exponent of the subject. Okay, this sometimes could causes problems in the analysis. So think about it. This is important. It is important for you to understand this. Okay, so exponents of the object, which means direct object, also words, noun phrases, and clauses. So we have 13, A, B, and C. Okay. I don't know whether we need it. Okay. Whether we need it, it's a clause. We have a predication. I think we already explained it. How do you know that some substructure is a clause? Because it has the relation of predication. This is what we did last time. Okay. So we have a clause functioning as the direct object. How can you prove that this is the direct object? You can replace it. We know that, for example. I don't know that. I don't know the truth. You can use the noun phrase instead of the clause, okay? So we have a clause, which is the exponent of the object, okay? B, she bought the new syntax textbook. She bought the new syntax textbook. So we have the transitive verb buy, bought, and we have the noun phrase, which is the exponent of the object. In this case, it's a noun phrase. Or finally, in C, he saw Barbara. Okay, Barbara is a word, exponent of the object. So we have noun phrases, clauses, or even words without any modification. Okay. These are the exponents of the object. Okay. Now, perhaps more interesting, exponents of adverbials. So we have adverbial as the function. You'll see that we have several possibilities here. Okay. Exponents could be adverbial phrase, noun phrase, prepositional phrase, even clauses. Quite a lot of choices. Okay. So let's see 14. Okay, 14, A, B, and C. Okay, they will arrive tomorrow. What would be your analysis of this tomorrow? This is an adverbial, but what kind of exponent is that? Tomorrow. This is an adverb. You know that tomorrow is an adverb, one word, adverb. That's why I have here, okay? But this word functions as an exponent of the category of adverbials. Think about, again, adverb and adverbial, not the same thing, okay? How about B? She will be here next week. We had a similar example. Next week is a noun phrase, but in this case, this is an exponent of the adverbial, okay? Showing time. This is temporal adverbial, okay? That book is not in the library. In the library, it's a prepositional phrase. You remember why this is a prepositional phrase? Because we have a preposition as the head and noun phrase following this prepositional head, okay? So this is a structurally prepositional phrase, but it is an exponent of the category of adverbials. Again, this is an adverbial of place, not time, but place, okay? Let me go back because we had a couple of examples of adverbial clauses, okay? This is an example of because they didn't study enough, or if they arrive soon. This is an example of a clause, which is the exponent of the adverbial, okay? That's why I have it here, okay? Clauses. So you have examples with because and if, okay? Clauses, okay? Finally, we have the subject complement and exponents of subject complement. So this could be a noun phrase or an adjective phrase or just an adjective and also a clause, okay? So think about it, 15, A and B. Helen is clever. This is just an adjective, exponent of the category of subject complement. If you add is a clever girl, then it is a noun phrase as an exponent. And finally, the assumption is that things will improve. That things will improve is obviously a clause because you have a predication will improve. This is a clause. And functions as the subject complement, exponent of the subject complement. How do you know that this is a subject complement? Because you have the verb be. This is the most typical copula be. This is the subject complement, not the direct object. Okay, so these are exponents. Okay, do you have any questions? This is the section about exponents. Okay, about syntactic functions. Okay, we did it. Okay, if not, then we can proceed with some syntactic functions which can be viewed. This is the new term, arguments of a verb. Okay, so remember we have syntactic functions like subject, object direct, indirect object, adverbial, and so on. In some approaches, some grammarians, we call these syntactic functions arguments of a verb. So the verb is the central part of the predication, and it has some arguments like the subject or the direct object or the adverbial. Okay, so according to the number of arguments, grammarians divide verbs into actually 2 or 3 groups. Okay, you see why. Monovalent verbs. These verbs are intransitive. We have only why mono. You should associate mono with one. Okay, mono means one. They require only one argument, and that is the subject. The verb is intransitive. It has only one argument. This is the subject, monovalent. Bivalent verbs, you should associate bi with 2, like bicycle, 2 cycles. Okay, bicycle with 2. These are transitive verbs, subject followed by a verb and an object. So the verb has 2 arguments, the subject and the object. C, this is the 3rd group. Trivalent verbs, obviously tri meaning 3. These are transitive verbs, subject, verb, indirect object, and direct object. Okay, we already had an example like 16a. Peter gave Connie a book. So we have Connie indirect object, a book direct object. That's why we call them trivalent, which means you have 3 arguments, the subject, indirect object, and direct object. Okay, so we have, according to the arguments, to the number of arguments, we have monovalent, bivalent, trivalent. Okay, maybe you did, perhaps in your grammar course, perhaps you use the term divalent, di. Okay, you should think about it. Different grammarians use different terms. Did you use the term divalent verbs in the grammar course? If not, yes, sorry, could you repeat it?
We only talked about detransitive verbs and so on.
Yes, exactly. So detransitive verbs, think about it. Which verbs are detransitive in English?
If they have 2 objects.
Exactly. So just think about it. Please do not mix it, okay? This is our trivalent verbs. Detransitive, exactly. Thank you for mentioning it, okay? So think about it. Detransitive verbs in your grammar course is the verbs which have indirect and direct object. But in our terminology, they are trivalent because they have the subject. We count the subject as well, okay? So just don't confuse them, okay? This is a slightly different division. Yes, okay? Harry bought the flowers, B, 16b. This is a simply bivalent verb. We have the verb be, we have the argument Harry subject, and the argument the flowers, which is the object. So this is the bivalent 2 arguments, okay? Okay, so we have arguments. Remember, we have the verb as the central part of the clause of the predication and the verb's arguments. And these arguments, now we can mention semantic roles. These arguments are related to semantic roles. They have semantic roles, okay? For example, subject, the typical semantic role of the subject is the agent, but there are other possibilities as well, okay? So let's see 17A to E, okay? So agent, how would you describe an agent before we check the examples? Which subject would be an agent?
Doer of action.
Yes, you can use this exactly, doer of the action, which means this implies that subject should be animate, human, at least animate, to do something, and he or she is willing to do something, doer of the action. This is a good example to rephrase it, doer of the action, okay? Think about it, it should be animate if somebody is doing something, okay? So 17A, Vince bought a new car. Vince, we're interested in the subject now. This is the agent, animate, human, willingly doing something, okay? Doer of the action, yes, okay? However, we have B, C, D, and E, okay? The computer solved the problem. In brackets, you already have the semantic role. This is the semantic role of the subject. The computer solved the problem. The computer is not an agent. Now, why the computer is not an agent? Why do grammarians call it instrument?
Because it is not animate.
Exactly, so it's not animate. The computer by itself cannot do anything. You have to be there to give it instructions, okay? So this is an instrument, think about it. Agent, animate, instrument inanimate, somebody else uses the instrument, okay? The example C, the electric shock killed them, okay? External cause, as you can see it in brackets, okay? So we have the electric shock, not an agent, not an instrument, but external cause. Why do you think we call it external cause? Why not an instrument? It's clearly not an agent, but why not an instrument?
There we do not have human force.
Yes, who would be using this, okay? This is a natural phenomenon. We do not have an agent included doing something with the instrument, okay? Think about it, this is interesting, okay? So this is the external cause as a natural phenomenon, okay? The electric shock, okay? Then something which is more simple, tomorrow is Wednesday, tomorrow is the subject, but it's temporal, it denotes time. And Madrid is a large town, it's locative, it denotes location, okay? Not an agent clearly, okay? So think about it, we have semantic roles. Typically subject is the agent, but we have other options as well, okay? Now, let's see the typical semantic role of the direct object, okay? The direct object is typically the patient. You know that this from probably lectures about passivization, okay? Perhaps you know what is the other term for patient. You have the other term, you're going to use it in grammar next week. Perhaps you already used the term patient, or sometimes called theme, but you can stick to the patient, it's easier, okay? So the direct object is the patient. Okay, let me find an example of one of those which we had. For example, Harry bought the flowers. The flowers is the patient. Well, in which sense the patient? Well, it's affected by something, by somebody which the subject does, affected, the patient, okay? And finally, we have the indirect object. Indirect object, it has the recipient or addressee, has the semantic role of the recipient. Okay, let me find an example which we had, like 16a. Peter gave Connie a book. Connie is the indirect object, and it is a recipient. Why? Because she receives a book from the subject, okay? So this is a recipient, okay? So think about it. Typical role for the direct object, the patient. Typical role for the indirect object, the recipient. Sometimes called also addressee, okay? And that's all about the semantic roles and arguments. Now we can start with something else. Okay, let me ask you if there are any questions about this segment before we proceed. Okay, if not, then we proceed with the communicative sentence perspective. This is slightly different than the previous analysis. Why? Because in the previous analysis, we did what? We analyzed the structure, like noun phrases, clauses, predicates, subject, adverbials, and so on, and their function. In this case, we study the structure of clauses and sentences within communication and transfer of information. Okay, you see, we are interested in the information transferred in a communication. Okay, you'll see what it means in the following examples. Okay, so we are not so much interested in the subject, predicate, adverbial, but in theme or topic. This is the information usually known to the speaker or hearer. The second part of the clause is rime or comment. This is pronounced theme and rime, okay? Comment, something new about the topic. So we are interested in the new information, new piece of information, and something already known. Already known is theme or topic. Something new is comment or rime. Let's see how it works in 18, okay? Paul bought a house in the country. So, for example, Paul is the subject in the analysis. A house in the country is the object. But in our analysis, communicative sentence perspective, we're going to say what? Paul is the theme or topic. It is, as you have it here, known. Paul is the person known to the speaker who says that and to the hearer. Okay, the speaker and the hearer included in the conversation already know who Paul is. You don't have to explain it. Okay, so that's why this is theme or topic. You're talking about Paul. This is information known to the speaker or hearer. And then you add something new. The second part, both the house in the country, is rime or comment. You add something new about this subject. Okay, so this is what we do in communicative sentence perspective. New pieces of information and already familiar or known pieces of information. This is the focus of analysis. Okay, so we study the arrangement of information in a clause or a sentence. Okay, so let me remind you, this is called communicative sentence perspective because we study communication. Okay, and we can have two types of arrangement of information in a clause or a sentence. Okay, so we have communicatively unmarked clauses or sentences. This is the typical WO means word order. Communicatively marked clauses or sentences. WO emphasizes something else. It's not typical. Okay, let me remind you, you probably remember when we discussed phonology and phonemes. Which you remember distinctive features. Which distinctive features were marked and unmarked? If you say that if a distinctive feature, for example, if phonology is marked, then it means what? Well, it simply means that it is present. Okay? You remember plus, minus, voiced. Unmarked, meaning typical. In this case, it means typical, something which is usually the word order. In this analysis, communicatively marked clauses are those which are not typical. They emphasize something else. Okay? So, for example, it would be clearer with 18A and B, or 20. Okay? So, Helen ate the cookie. This is the unmarked word order, typical word order. You have the subject, you have the verb active, and the object. And then you have the cookie was eaten by Helen. This is the B example, communicatively marked. Why? Because we passivized. What do you think what did we change by passivization? Word order emphasizes something. What do we want to emphasize in 19B when we passivized?
We want to emphasize
That Helen ate the cookie.
Yes, but you start with the cookie, okay? What was the context like? For example, somebody, for example, two persons look at I don't know, at the table and says, okay, there was a cookie there, okay? And somebody else says, the cookie was eaten by Helen, which means you're talking about the cookie. And the new piece of information is who was it eaten by, okay? So this is the marked case because you would naturally talk about Helen. But in this case, you want to emphasize the cookie. This cookie was eaten by Helen, okay? So think about it. That's why this is marked, because it's not typical, emphasizes something else. In this case, we emphasize the cookie. We want to start with the cookie, not with the Helen, okay? We can have it the same thing in Serbian, like 20 A and B. Peter je kupio knjigu, knjigu je kupio Petar, okay? Perhaps it's even easier in Serbian. This would be unmarked, A. Petar je kupio knjigu, you start with the agent who did something. But in B, this is the marked case because you change the word order. And what do you think in Serbian? What do you want to emphasize this in 20B?
The book itself.
The book itself, exactly. Okay. Perhaps you can think about the context. For example, you see a certain book in your study on your desk, and then perhaps you add as a comment, knjigu je kupio Petar, meaning tu knjigu. Znači, vama je sada u fokusu knjiga. Yes, this is what you want to emphasize, okay? So this is all about this. Let me just go back slightly, okay? This is communicative sentence perspective. Think about the division, team or Tommy, cream or comment. And we have marked and unmarked word order, arrangement of information, okay? So if you passivize, this will be marked and you want to emphasize something else, okay? That's all we're going to say about communicative sentence perspective. This is one of the questions for the oral exam. So do you have any questions about this or not? Okay, let me wait for a couple of seconds because we had just to finish transformational generative syntax. Okay, so this was communicative sentence perspective. And this is the last topic about syntax, okay? We have to say something about the specific kind of syntax, transformational generative syntax. Perhaps you are familiar with this, but I'm absolutely sure you're familiar with the name of Noam Chomsky. Who is Noam Chomsky? He is still alive. Who is Noam Chomsky?
He's a famous linguist and activist.
Exactly, famous linguist, okay? He is a famous American linguist. This is what you are expected to know for the exam, okay? He is a famous American linguist. He developed this transformational generative syntax from the late 1950s, which means mid-20th century, okay? You're expected to know that. And now, we are not going into details. We are just going to give you, I'm just going to give you some features of this syntax, okay? First of all, why is it called generative syntax? From the word to generate, which means to create phrases and clauses and sentences. Chomsky is interested in how sentences are created in our mind, okay? Not just to analyze the sentences you see or hear, but think about something which is deeper, okay? How sentences are generated, okay? Then, transformational, because he wants to show how one structure is transformed to the other structure, okay? So he has two key notions, surface structure and deep structure, and transformations, okay? So surface structure, površinska struktura in Serbian as well, dubinska struktura in Serbian as well, okay? Površinska struktura, it means simply that you have, this is the structure which you can see, which means read or hear. This is the structure in communication. Deep structure is something which exists in your mind before you say a sentence or before you write a sentence. So it is deeper in your mind. It's more abstract. We'll have an example later, okay? And he needs transformations to do what? To transform deep structure into the surface structure, okay? So transformations used to transform deep structure into the surface structure. We can show this through three diagrams, okay? Now, let me repeat this. So he is interested in generative syntax, generation of sentences and clauses and phrases, and how you transform structures from deep structure to the surface structure. Surface structure, the structure which we can see or read or hear, okay? I have one example here, okay? So their parents have bought a new house. We already had this kind of a tree diagram. So I'm going to divide it into subject, into a noun phrase and predicate phrase. This is the subject, this is the predicate, okay? And then noun phrase divided into determiner and noun, which means their and parents. Predicate phrase divided into verb phrase and noun phrase. Verb phrase into auxiliary and V. Auxiliary includes pres means present and have. Možda se ne vidi jasno, znači samo da bude jasno, auxiliary includes these two items, present and have. Verb is by. A noun phrase is determiner, and again a noun phrase, determiner a, and another noun phrase, adjective and noun, new house, okay? So what is interesting here, think about this VP, okay? This is the surface structure that their parents have bought a new house, have bought, okay? In the deep structure in your mind, according to Chomsky, before you make this sentence, you have this in your mind. You have present, you know that you're going to talk about present tense. This is present perfect. You have the auxiliary have, okay? And you have the infinitive by. In deep structure, it's by. So you have to apply, for example, which transformation? You have to say, okay, you relate present to have, this is have. You agree it with plural subject. It's not going to be has but have because the subject is plural. And then you have to agree have with by, which means have requires both. This is a small transformation which you make in your mind to get the surface structure their parents have bought a new house. Okay? This is the first transformation you can do. But what can we do if we want to passivize? We can also make a new transformation, which means what? You can do this, you can take this noun phrase, a new house, move it to the initial position, and this noun phrase, their parents, move to the final position. So this is how you get a passive sentence, okay? What happens if you want to get a negative sentence? This is positive, have bought. If you want to get a negative sentence, you simply add not after have, haven't. You add had not here, okay? If you want to form a question, you move have to the beginning, have their parents bought their house, and so on and so on, okay? So this is what Chomsky does in transformational generative syntax. So to sum up, this is a specific kind of syntax, generation of structures and transformation of structures. Surface deep structure looks like this with some simple transformations, okay? So do you have any questions? This is the end of syntax. This is the end of syntax before I go to the next file, okay? So transformational generative syntax, this is one of the questions for the oral exam. You need to say what we said during the lectures, okay? You don't need anything else, okay? So let me add something, the new file, okay? Okay.
Could you explain one more what's the deep structure?
Deep structures, okay? So for example, this tree diagram we have here, this looks like a deep structure. You see this S and P predicate phrase, especially this VP. This is what you had in your mind as a deep structure. Before forming a surface structure, in your mind, you have to perform some transformations like have, relate present to have, so it's not going to be had, it has to be have. The subject, their parents, is plural, it's not going to be has, but have. And then again, you have to transform this by into the adequate form like both. Have requires both, okay? So this looks like a deep structure in our mind, okay? This is the structure to which you apply some transformations to get the surface structure. Is it clearer now, I think?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let's check this, okay? Let's go through to the next file. Okay, do you see the next file now?
Yes.
Semantics, okay? Okay, this was syntax, okay? Now we have only one more level of linguistic analysis. We are going to start semantics today, okay? We have half an hour. So let me remind you, we have several levels of linguistic analysis. We started with sounds and phonemes like you know, phonetics, phonology. Then we had morphology, words, syntax, units larger than words, like words, phrases, clauses, sentences. And now we have semantics. Semantics studies meaning, obviously. Okay, I'm sure you already know that, but we have to say something about it and check some examples. Okay, so semantics, the last level of analysis we are going to discuss. Semantikos, this is a Greek word in origin, means something having meaning, related to meaning. A certain word has meaning. Okay, makes sense. This is so semantics studies meanings of words, phrases, and clauses and sentences. So we have linguistic units, you know, like words, phrases, clauses, and sentences, and we attach meaning to these units. So we have, for example, strings of sounds, which means words, and they acquire specific meaning. Let me give you an example, okay? You remember that we started from sounds and phonemes. Probably remember, I'm sure you remember that phonemes do not have any meaning. So when we combine phonemes of sounds into syllables and words, words are the units, or you remember morphemes and words, they are smallest units with the meaning, okay? So we form, using phonemes, we form words and morphemes, and these words acquire specific meanings. How does that happen? What do you think? How do we get meaning of words? For example, how do you know that book, for example, in English exactly means this? Knjiga in Serbian exactly means this. This is a matter of agreement. During the language development of English or development of Serbian, people who speak English or who spoke English or Serbian, they simply made an agreement, okay, saying, okay, this string of phonemes like book is going to mean this object, okay? So strings of words, they acquire meaning. This is a matter of agreement among the people who speak a certain language, okay? So it's not just words that they have meanings. The combination of these strings also have meanings. By this combination of strings, I mean combinations of words, which means phrases also have their meanings. Then clauses and sentences. It's not just words that have meaning, okay? So to sum up the definition of semantics, semantics studies meanings of units. So these units can be words, phrases, clauses, sentences, not just words. They study combinations of meanings of these units, like phrases, clauses, sentences, but also studies relations between the meanings of these units, okay? So this is going to be easier if you check the examples in what we have in brackets, the same or opposite meaning. Think about two words which have the opposite meaning. Perhaps you already know, how do we call these words, two words which have the opposite meaning?
Antonyms.
Antonyms, exactly. So this is what I have in mind, okay? Relations between meanings of units. So we have two words, and we study the relation, not just their meaning, each of these words, each of these word or words, okay? But relations between them. So they can have the opposite meaning, they can have the same meaning, and so on. You'll see what it means when we get to the examples, okay? So studies the meaning of units, but also relation between the meanings of units. You specify if something unit, if for example, two units have the same or opposite meaning and so on. we'll have examples. We'll have quite a lot of examples in a couple of minutes, okay? So semantics also has to explain the differences in meaning, not just meaning, but differences in meaning, ambiguities, and semantic irregularities. Now we come to the examples 1 and 2, where I would like to have your comment, okay? So how about the example 1? This is an example of ambiguity, which means in semantics, you can have 2 interpretations, 2 readings of this sentence. Perhaps you can actually specify which 2 readings of this sentence 1.
You can be, she can't have children, or she dislikes children.
Exactly. This is what you should, I don't have them here, but this is exactly as you said, okay? Cannot have children or cannot stand children, yes, okay? Where do we have ambiguity? Ambiguity stems from this verb bear. Bear, you know what it can mean in English. So the verb bear in this sentence creates an ambiguity. This is what we have to explain in semantics, okay? The same thing goes with 2. His unmarried sister is married to a bachelor, okay? So this is an example of a semantic irregularity, okay? Why this 2 is semantically irregular?
Because if she is unmarried, she cannot be married to a bachelor.
Exactly. Okay, this is not difficult, but we need these explanations for the oral exam or perhaps written exam. Okay, unmarried cannot be married to, and even a bachelor is by definition not married. So not married to a bachelor is also irregular. Okay, all right. So this is what we all study in semantics: differences, ambiguities, semantic irregularities. Okay, now. The key notion is meaning. Semantic studies meaning, but it's actually quite difficult to define. So we are not going into this discussion. Let me just say that philosophers, linguists, there are different approaches, different theories by different philosophers and linguists. There are still some unsolved issues, still debates going on about this. What meaning actually means, what is the meaning, what is the nature of meaning, but we are not going to discuss that. We are just going to say that meanings for us, there are going to be ideas or concepts which we relate to the linguistic units, okay, to words, phrases, or sentences. So simply ideas or concepts. So if you have the word dog, the meaning of this word is the living animal, or the concept which we relate to this word, okay? We are not going into the discussion. The problem, one of the problems in this discussion about the meaning of, the nature of meaning is, for example, the meaning of the or for. How can we explain what is the meaning of the definite article? Or what is the meaning of the preposition for? It's difficult to explain. This is one of the things which those philosophers and linguists try to answer. What is the meaning of these words? Or what could be the problem with vampire or unicorn? Or even, I'm sure you can provide, you don't have to repeat these for the oral exam. You can provide examples from Harry Potter. I'm sure you can have a lot of these creatures, okay? So what is the problem with bee, for example, for our definition of meaning?
They're not part of our reality.
Yes, they do not belong to our reality. They belong to imagination, okay? So yes, we do have vampire or unicorn. We do have an idea, but they do not belong to our reality, okay? Or sometimes see abstract notions like hate, worry, and so on, also difficult to explain. What is their meaning? It's easier if you want to explain the meaning of dog or a book or a desk, okay? But abstract notions, more difficult to explain, okay? So these are some of the problems which semantics and philosophers, linguists have to explain. But as I said, we're not going to go into this discussion. Just think about it, okay? It's not as easy as it looks at first sight, okay? However, we're going to make a distinction between several kinds of meanings, okay? The first one is lexical and grammatical. So lexical meaning is notions from our reality, physical objects, persons, or even ideas, okay? So lexical related to our reality, including ideas, okay, from our imagination. However, grammatical meaning is related to grammatical categories like number, person, tense, and so on. For example, ed in English denotes grammatical meaning, not lexical meaning, because ed denotes past tense, okay? So grammatical meanings related to grammatical categories, okay? For example, in one word, you can often combine these meanings, like in books. Book without s denotes a concept, and it denotes plural. Plural is the grammatical meaning. Concept belongs to the lexical meaning, okay? So lexical meaning, notions, grammatical meanings, grammatical categories, okay? Referential and emotive meaning. Referential meaning is objective or neutral, without any specific special attitude like father or mother. Emotive, when you use these terms, you have a specific attitude. This is emotionally colored. So dad or mom and so on. So you have a specific emotive attitude, okay? Referential and emotive. So referential is neutral, objective. Concrete and abstract meaning. Concrete meaning is a specific meaning related to material objects like book or a car. So material objects. Abstract meaning, ideas, beauty, success, and so on. This is not too difficult, okay? So we have abstract and concrete meanings, but we can also have literal and figurative meanings. Literal meaning, and now we have a couple of examples, and I'm going to have a question for you, okay? Literal and figurative meaning. Literal meaning is the primary meaning of a unit. Figurative meaning, or sometimes also called metaphorical meaning, is developed from this literal meaning. So literal, primary or basic. Figurative, developed, metaphorical, okay? Now, let's check two examples from Serbian and English. Glava in Serbian. What is the literal meaning? Obviously, part of your body, okay? Glava. But can you think of a figurative meaning, word glava used in Serbian to denote something else, okay? Can you think of an example?
A head of a family.
Glava porodice, tako je, yes. So this is figurative, okay? Do you have another example of glava?
Glava knjige.
Glava knjige. Glava, yes. Yes, this is exactly what I had in mind. Glava poglavlje, yes, okay. So this is figurative. How did we get to glava porodice from glava? What do you think? How did we get from glava to glava porodice?
Well, because a head is something essential for us, so that's also why a father is important, I guess.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, this is yes, just go on, yes.
Yeah, we project the use of head in our body to the use of the head of the family.
Yes, exactly. This is the right way of thinking. So, as you said, glava deo tela, it's significant, the brain is there and so on. And glava porodice also something which is significant, important. You project some features of physical, literal meaning to the figurative meaning, okay? Neck, how about an English example? Neck, you know what the neck is? Neck is also literally part of your body. Could you think of an example in English where you use neck but with a different meaning? Well, the most typical example is bottle.
Could it be like sticking my neck out for you?
Sticking, it is also a figurative meaning, yes. But what is the meaning of this? Stick out somebody's neck, which means what?
Meaning he or the person is, well, it's trying to help a person with a certain, and it can be dangerous for the person who is doing so.
Yes, exactly. This is also a figurative meaning. We do not mean literal neck, okay? We mean to put yourself in danger. Yes, yes, okay. I had in mind more concrete uses. What about the bottle? Bottles have necks, okay? Bottlenecks, okay? And what about, for example, some musical instruments, okay, like a violin? And so if you play a violin, people say that it could have a neck and so on, okay? So think about it. Okay, you need examples. You'll have more examples later. Okay, literal, figurative meaning, glava, neck. You could try to provide more examples with these, but we'll have more examples next week probably. Okay, so this was literal and figurative. Think about the relation, the link between these two notions. There is a link. And finally, denotation and connotation. Okay, so denotation is the very concept which is denoted by a word. So denotation, the concept or the notion. But connotation is actually there are associations with this concept, something which you relate to the concept. Okay, so for example, it will be easier with an example, roof. Roof is part of the house. This is the denotation. This is what it denotes. However, if you say that you have a roof above your head, this looks like what? Sounds like protection. U srpskom, šta znači kad kažete da neko ima krov nad glavom?
Place to live.
Yes, but it does not mean literal roof, okay? This is connotation. It means you are protected, you have where to stay, and so on, okay? So think about it. Denotation, physical roof, part of the house. Connotation, associations which you have with certain concept or noun, like with a roof, like protection. You're protected in a way. You have a roof above your head, okay? So these are kinds of meanings, okay? Several kinds of meanings, okay? Do you have any questions about this, or we can go to historical semantics quite quickly?
Yeah, could you please provide us with maybe additional examples for referential and emotive meanings that are in father and dad?
Yes,
and so on?
yes, okay, let me just go back, okay? Referential and emotive, okay? Perhaps, I'm sure you can provide referential word. The referential meaning is dog, for example. What would be an emotive word with an emotive meaning? This word with an emotive meaning, dog and
Puppy, maybe?
puppy or doggy, okay? So this is emotive, okay? Dog is referential, it is neutral, okay? But if you want to add emotion to this word, you say puppy or doggy. You know that you can use doggy, okay? Is it clearer now? This is what it means, referential and emotive.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay? If there are no other questions, we can go briefly to historical semantics. Okay, historical semantics, as you can guess, historical meaning, actually it deals with the changes of meaning in time. So during language development, you know that words change their meaning, okay? You remember Old English examples, okay? So historical semantics studies changes in meaning in time. I have a couple of, actually 4 processes. You see that meaning is not stable. It changes in time, during centuries, during the development of language, okay? So there are 4 processes I'm going to mention. The first one is narrowing or specialization of meaning. I'm sure you can guess what it means. If it is narrowing, it means that you start from a general meaning, and then the word acquires a more specific meaning, more narrow meaning, okay? Like meat. Perhaps surprisingly, but in Old English, it meant food, any kind of food, general meaning, okay? And you know that in modern English, it means a specific kind of food. So this is narrowing or specialization. Again, from general meaning to the specific meaning, okay? The opposite process is widening or extension. You start from a specific meaning, and then the word acquires a general meaning, okay? Like bird. Initially, again, we are talking about Old English, okay? Bird meant something like small bird, not just any bird, but small bird. In modern English, you know that it has a general meaning of any bird, not any specified bird, okay? So A, B are opposite, narrowing or widening, okay? C, deterioration. You know what it means, but let me explain it with the example knave, okay? For example, Middle English, Middle Ages, it meant something like male servant, knave, male servant, okay, which is not negative. But deterioration means that it acquired a negative meaning, okay? What is the meaning of knave in modern English? How would you translate this into Serbian, knave? Knave is a bad person. Maybe you can translate it as nitkov, for example, okay? So from a male servant to a bad person, deterioration. The meaning changes in the negative direction, okay? And we have elevation, which is the opposite of deterioration, which means you start from relatively negative, but it gets a better, more positive meaning, okay? You remember, we had an example in Old English, Knecht, which is knight in modern English. You probably know that who was the knight in Middle Ages, in the Middle Ages? Well, basically, he was a male person, a male adult who had to fight for his lord, usually with a horse, knight, okay? So they were actually fighters to their lord. You know from TV shows and films that somebody, king or somebody, wants to start a war and he calls his knights to go to the battle, okay? But what is the meaning of knight in modern English? It has the same meaning, but also which meaning in modern English, knight? If you think about nobility, aristocracy, and so on, knight means what in modern English?
Certain title.
Title, exactly. So this is what I had in mind. So you started from a kind of a soldier, okay, to the title. You know that you can get a title sir for some things you did, okay? So this is elevation from relatively bad, not fully bad, from relatively low to something which is better, okay? So this is what we do in historical semantics, changes of meaning. We have several processes, okay? Just notice that I don't have the definitions here on the slide in the file, okay? So you have to think about them. If you can note them down if it is not clear, okay? You just have the names of the processes, okay? And just for about 5 to 10 minutes more, we are not going to use up all the time, okay? So borrowing. Meaning also changes when you borrow words, okay? You remember we already, when we did morphemes and morphology, we said that sometimes words are not created but borrowed, okay? But meaning sometimes changes when you borrow words, okay? For example, in Serbian, we borrowed this word from different languages, from Latin, German, or Italian, and they do not actually mean exactly the same, okay? Magistar is the title, you know, magistar, skraćeno nekada, danas je to master, okay? Well, what was the original meaning of magistar in Latin?
Teacher.
Teacher, yes, teacher, okay? Maestor from German, obviously, but it does not mean the same as magister. Maestor means a certain craft, okay? And finally, maestro from Italian, who is, from whom, for which person we use the term maestro in Serbian? If you think about classical music, who is maestro?
Somebody who can play certain instruments very well.
Yes.
Certain virtuoso.
Yes, okay. Or even more specifically, maestro is usually the conductor, okay? So if you have an orchestra, znači ako ste gledali neki prenos ili negde, onda kad ulazi dirigent, obično ga zovemo maestro. A maestro je i to što ste, čini mi se vi rekli, neko koji je izrazito uspešan u nekom vidu umetnosti i tako dalje. Pa je možda i Leonardo da Vinci maestro and so on. But anyway, maestro, more specifically the conductor of an orchestra, okay? Now, I would like you to explain, although you have explanations in brackets, what happens with the verb meeting, which we borrowed from English? What is the meaning of this meeting in Serbian?
Mostly political.
Yes, something like this one, okay, rally. Meeting which we have in Serbian actually means rally. It means some kind of meeting outside. It has to be outside, and it is usually for or against something or somebody, okay? But the word meeting, which we actually borrowed from English, does not have this meaning. Znači, ovaj naš meeting nije isto što i ovaj meeting. Kod nas kad kažete meeting, to nije sastanak, jel tako? To je neki skup napolju, okay? Think about it, okay? How about a dress, English dress or jersey? What is the meaning of dress in Serbian?
Clothing, garments, footballers,
Yes.
Sport,
Yes. Yes.
people connected to sport.
Yes, exactly. More related to jersey, okay? But dress in English, you know what it means. We borrowed it, obviously, from English, but with a different meaning. When you say dress, to su obično fudbaleri, sportisti koji oblače deo, jeste, opreme. Okay? So think about it. When you borrow words, they may acquire different meanings. Okay? And just let me add something about this, and we'll stop in about 5 minutes. Okay? So we also have the so-called onomatopoeic words, also called iconic words. I'm sure you know, but let me hear it anyway. Which words are onomatopoeic words?
That imitate the sounds of the nature.
Of nature, exactly. This is the definition I need for the exam, okay? Imitating sounds of nature, like the wind or the sounds some animals make and so on, okay? And why do I have them here? Well, these words, onomatopoeic words, they do not change their meaning through time. That's why I have them here, okay? Precisely because they do not specific sounds from nature, okay? They do not change their time they do not change their meaning in time, okay? Do you have an example of a onomatopoeic word in Serbian or in English?
Squeak.
Yes, exactly, okay? So it does not change its meaning because it denotes a specific sound. Or in Serbian, av or bow wow, you know that it always implies the sounds dogs make and so on. Yes, okay? So think about it. That's why I have it here. Onomatopoeic words, they do not change their meaning in time because they imitate sounds, okay? And that's why they are called iconic words, because they do not change their meaning, okay? And that's all I wanted to add about onomatopoeic words, okay? And finally, let me just give you the division of semantics, and we'll stop here. We are not going to start lexical semantics, okay? So do you have any questions about the preceding section, or we can simply go to the division of semantics? Okay, if not, then semantics divided into two large segments: lexical semantics and sentential semantics. Quite easily, lexical semantics means meanings of words and phrases. You remember, we do not have predications in phrases, okay? And sentential semantics, meanings of clauses and sentences, okay? So lexical and sentential, it's quite easy to memorize, words and phrases and sentences. And finally, before we stop for today, okay, meanings are studied in a context. Meanings should study in the context, okay? So for example, you know that words, to know their real meaning, you need to find a context, okay? You remember the word I actually gave you, one of the examples I gave you, round. Without a context, it can mean several things, but round, if the context is boxing, it means one thing. If the context is, for example, some people sitting in a bar and drinking, and round means something else, okay? And you have many other examples where you need the context to get the right meaning of the word, okay? So words get their real meaning in a context. That's why I have it here, okay? Meaning studied in a context, okay? So again, notice that you don't have an explanation here, just statement, meaning studied in a context, okay? All right, and that's all. We are going to stop here because this is the topic lexical semantics. We do not want to start this now. We have maybe far more minutes. Okay, do you have any questions about these or any other questions? So we're going to stop here with lexical semantics. Okay, if you do not have any questions, okay, so ništa, ja vas onda pozdravljam, pa ćemo se čuti, znači ovih dana sa Natašom već razgovaramo o terminu za kolokvijum, to neće biti sad sljedeći ponedeljak, to bi bilo prerano, ali dobit ćete informaciju. Znači, eto tako, pozdravljam vas, pa doviđenja, pa se onda čujemo i vidimo na nekom narednom predavanju.